Welcome back. In this video, we are going to solve quadratics by completing the square, or as I like to call it, completing the perfect square trinomial. You may recall that the last time we solved quadratics, we would take the square root of both sides. And on a few of those, we had perfect square trinomials. We had some quantity squared equals something. So we simply took the square root of both sides. Well, that works great when we have a perfect square trinomial, but we don't always have that. So an example like this, we take the square root of both sides, we're left with x plus 1 equals plus or minus 2 square root of 2, and then we get x equals negative 1 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 2. By using the process featured in this video, we're going to learn to turn every quadratic in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So every quadratic that's in standard form into a perfect square trinomial. We'll turn it into some quantity squared, which would give us the capability to solve that quadratic by square rooting both sides. So let's take a look at something like x squared plus 8x plus 1 equals 0. Well, that certainly is not a perfect square trinomial. That can't be factored. So we're going to kind of work through our process and solve this one by completing the square. So let's take a look at our process of completing the square. In order to complete the square, a, or the coefficient on our quadratic term on x squared, must be 1. If it's not equal to 1, then we'll have to divide each term by a. So in our example here, a is equal to 1. So I don't have to divide, so I can just start with x squared plus 8x plus 1 equals 0. Our second step then says to subtract c, or our constant, from both sides, okay, or c over a if we had to divide, but we didn't have to divide here. So that would give us 8x squared plus 8x plus blank equals negative 1. So we subtracted 1 from both sides, so we get x squared plus 8x plus blank equals negative 1. So this is where we will have our perfect square trinomial. And in that blank spot there, that is where we're going to manufacture a number to make this side a perfect square trinomial. So step 3 says take the coefficient on x, so our linear term, 8, and if it's divided by a, it would be whatever that fraction is, and multiply it by 1/2. So we're going to take 8, multiply it by 1/2, and we're going to get 8 over 2, or 4. And that's going to go in our blank space. So we'll take x squared plus 8x plus 4 equals negative 1. Now I kind of combine steps 3 and 4 here, usually at once. Now we have to take that value that we manufactured and square it. We always have to square that value, okay? So now we have a perfect square trinomial every single time. So this is our PST, okay? So I have x squared plus 8x plus 4 squared equals negative 1. And I don't square the 4 on the left-hand side. I usually leave it because when we factor this, that's just going to become x plus 4 quantity squared. Okay? And we'll always take whatever sign we have here will be the same sign in our PST, in our quantity squared. Now, something to keep in mind as we go down to the next part here, we have manufactured a number and we've added it to one side. We've manufactured this 4 squared. We've created this by doing this b over a times 1/2. So essentially we've made the left side of our equation bigger by 16. So you must remember to add the 4 squared to both sides. So we have to add 16. Add that value to the other side. Now, it's not always going to be 16, but in this example, it's 16. So we've done that, so we get x plus 4 quantity squared equals 15. So now we have our PST, and now we can take the square roots of both sides. So by taking the square root of both sides, we get x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 15, and then we simplify by subtracting 4 from both sides, and we get x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 15. And those are our two solutions for x. X is negative 4 plus the square root of 15, and x is negative 4 minus the square root of 15. So let's take a look at some sample problems. First one, x squared plus 14x equals negative 32. This one's already set up for us. We've got a is equal to 1. And so we don't have to divide by anything. And our constant's already been moved to the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and get this going. I'll put plus in, and then I'll leave my blank space. I'm a big fan of the blank space, so we know where to complete the square. Our second step is to take b and divide it by 2. So this becomes 14 over 2, and then we have to square it. So I took b and multiplied it by 1/2, and I squared it. Well, we all know that 14 over 2 is 7, so we have x squared plus 14x plus 7 squared equals negative 32. But now we manufactured 7 squared, so we have to remember to add 7 squared, or 49, to both sides. Well, here's my perfect square trinomial. It's x squared plus 7, it's x plus 7 quantity squared equals, and then negative 32 plus 49 is, my arithmetic is right, 17. And then I go ahead and I can solve by square rooting both sides. So we get x plus 7 equals plus or minus the square root of 17. We subtract 7 from both sides, and x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 17. And notice how I always tuck my value here. This negative 7, I put it in before my square root. So make sure you do that. Put your, whatever you're adding or subtracting to isolate x, I always try and put it in front of the plus or minus. Okay? So there's one of my helpful hints for the day. Let's take a look at another sample problem. X squared minus 4x plus 2 equals 0. Now again, a is equal to 1 here, so I don't have to divide by anything. But I do want to subtract 2 from both sides because I want to complete the square in this blank spot here. So I get x squared minus 4x plus some number I'm going to manufacture equals negative 2. And now I'll go ahead and manufacture my number. It's negative 4 over 2 quantity squared, which is going to be a positive 4. So I get x squared minus 4x plus really 2 squared equals negative 2, and then plus 4, because 2 squared is 4. I have to remember to add that to the other side. So my perfect square trinomial is x minus 2 quantity squared equals positive 2. And then I can square root both sides. So I get x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 2. And now I'm going to take that negative 2, I'm going to add it to both sides, but I'm going to put it in that blank spot there. So I get x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. And then our final sample problem, 4x squared minus 16 minus 9 equals 0. Now this one, a is not equal to 1, so I will have to divide everything by 4. So I get x squared minus 4x plus some blank equals, and I'm going to add my 9/4 to the other side right away. I'm going to complete the square, negative 4 over 2 squared, so I get x squared minus 4x plus 2 squared, so I get x minus 2 quantity squared again, equals 9/4 plus 4, which is 9/4 plus 16/4. So I get x minus 2 squared equals 25/4. I have my common denominator, so I can add my fractions. I square root both sides. X minus 2 equals plus or minus 5/2. I add 2 to both sides. And my final answer becomes x equals 2 plus or minus 5/2. Now this one, I can continue to simplify. So I'm going to make that x equals 4/2 plus 5/2, or x could equal 4/2 minus 5/2. So my final answer here is x equals 9/2 and x equals negative 1/2. This final sample problem, I'll save that for you. You can do that and bring that to class. And finally, now we have 3 different ways to solve quadratics for x. We have 3 different ways to solve for the roots, or the solutions, or the x-intercepts, all different names, or even the zeros. Okay, so we're finding where our graph hits the x-axis. We've got 3 different ways to do that now. We can factor, we can square root both sides if b equals 0, or we can complete the square, or what I like to say, complete the perfect square trinomial. And that wraps this up, this lesson on completing the square, and we will see you in class.